Hey DIYers around the globe, I wanted to show you my method for measuring and cutting a butcher block countertop for this corner sink cabinet base for our kitchen. Now as you can see, our kitchen is a work in progress. We wanted to leave as much of it functional as possible while we're working on our kitchen because we're a family of four and we need kitchen access, at least some of it. So anyway, you can see that some of it is operational here, so you're not going to see total perfection because I am a DIYer, and some of this is being done while a functional kitchen is in place. So what we're doing is we're working on the section here, and you can see that I did some paint work up there on the existing Z brick. That brick came with the house. It wasn't our intention to put it in there, it was the previous owners. If it was up to us, that never would have been installed, but we had to work with what we had to work with, so we just decided to paint it. And then we're going to paint all the bottom and upper cabinets this blue right here that we've already tested on one of the drawers. So this cabinet you see here has been completed. It just needs to be painted, and I needed to build this cabinet out in our garage so I could measure off of it to build our corner unit right here. So I completed this cabinet first, I set it in place, and then I started to build this corner unit off of it. And the reason I did that was because there were a lot of complex pieces and parts for the corner unit. I want to try to get in here, and you can see there's 3/4 inch plywood for the bottom of this base. That's cut in a diamond shape, and it was a very complex set of cuts and measurements for this particular piece. But as you can see, it's all one piece, so it'll support the weight of what will be a cast iron sink resting on this unit eventually, and that's, you know, got some weight, well over 100 pounds. So we wanted to make sure all of the pieces for this corner base unit can handle that cast iron sink. So, and then I built on this base frame after adding a 3/4 inch thick piece of plywood here. The 3/4 inch plywood over on this other side is off the existing cabinet right here. So this corner unit just, you know, plays off the existing cabinet right there. And there's some mistakes that I made. There's a sliver that I cut because I mismeasured the right side of the floor piece. I was off by about an inch, but when you're looking at a 6-sided piece, I'm okay with that. And there's a piece I'm gonna have to cut for this sliver down here. This isn't a professional DIY video, so hey, mistakes were made. Anyway, because of the complexity of this corner unit, what I used as a template was regular old Christmas wrapping paper. What I did was I just rolled out the wrapping paper onto where I want to place the butcher block, and I rolled out about 5 feet in this direction and about 3 feet in this direction. I have an 8-foot long piece of maple butcher block that I need to cut up, and I need to get as much out of it as possible. What I did was, after I rolled it out and I cut it to width 25 inches to match the width of the butcher block, I then taped it in place, and then I drew out a standard size kitchen sink. You can see it there, 22 inches wide by 33 inches long. That's pretty standard. Actually, we already have the sink, it's in our garage, so I measured it up just to make sure that, you know, I wanted to compensate for the lips of the sink, and I wanted to make sure that, you know, I've got enough room to work with it here. So anyway, I measured out the sink, and I drew a pattern that is going to match how we'll place the sink. And you can see this line here was the first line I made because I figured I was going to center the sink off of the wall. But if I do that, I've got a plywood sheet right here that's going to get in the way of the sink. Now I still will bump up against it, so I'm going to cut a little bit out here, but I didn't want to cut too much. And same thing on this side. This you can probably see it right there. A little X marks where the left side of the corner base is. That's the 3/4 inch left side of the corner base. And this will be actually where the butcher block itself ends. So what I did was I took the 8-foot length that I know about, and I measured off that piece wasn't fixed in place, and that's why I bumped it out. I didn't fix it in place, by the way, because I wanted to be able to get in here and work if I have to. So that'll be fixed in place eventually. Anyway, I measured off right here 66 inches, 5.5 feet. That way I have an unbroken length of butcher block in this direction. And then I measured off the remaining 30 inches, 2.5 feet, to go from the center of where the sink will be to right about here. So there's going to be a seam here, but it's over where the left side of the corner base is going to be. All right, so I wanted the seam to the left side of the left to the left of the left side of the unit for added strength. And then we've got a lot of real estate to cover in this direction, so we'll get another 8-foot sheet of butcher block for this direction, but that's down the road. Anyway, what I did then was I measured out the sink area, and I need to be able to take some of this area, which will be cut out for the sink, and put it right here. So as you can see, I drew kind of a diagram. I need about, if I remember, the measurement was roughly 20-21 inches, give or take, for the widest point here. All right, and that's going to be easily taken out of here because of course we've got 22 inches here. So I can take this semi-triangular piece here and get it out of this area that's going to be coming out before we put in the sink. I'm also going to have some real estate here that will be removed, and I will use that for something. I'm not sure what yet. And you can say, hey, you know, gee, you could have moved these pieces down a little bit and just added a piece up here of butcher block for this area, from this area that's coming out. I decided not to do that because I only wanted one seam behind the sink. Otherwise I'd have two seams, and I just figured fewer seams is better for strength. But yeah, I suppose you could take that approach and just add a secondary piece here, but that was just a personal preference. I want strength. So there's going to be a fair amount of butcher block coming out of these areas that isn't used here that will have to be either scrapped or I'll use it for future projects. But anyway, once I get the butcher block cut, I will be able to then place it and then start cutting around this area for the sink. Okay, so here we are. I made the cuts, at least the first round of cuts necessary to get these butcher block pieces in place. And as you can see, I got a little bit of a gap here, but that's not a big deal because the sink's going to be coming up to about here. I really only need to cut out a wedge to fit in this gap right here, and then I'll also cut another piece from this real estate that's coming out for the sink. One of these pieces will give me what I need to take care of this, because I decided after all I'm going to bring this butcher block back to this wall area here. I didn't think I was going to go that far back, but now that I'm looking at the butcher block and it's gorgeous, I want to see more butcher block. So I'm going to use real estate in here to take care of this gap back here. Now for this piece up here, the two corner pieces that came off these large pieces here, as it happens, they match up perfectly because they were originally from, you know, this corner was over here and the other corner was over here, and the grain matches up. So I'm just going to glue these together, and then I'm going to have to trim things down a little bit so this piece fits after it's glued together to fit in here. But once that's glued up, I'm going to then attach it to these sides right here, and then I'll have a nice lip coming out over the corner cabinet, and the sink is going to be right here. So all of this real estate I'll be able to use for back here or other scrap projects, whatever. And then I've got my backsplash. Now none of this has been fastened down because I still got to move things around a little bit and get everything just right. So I'm probably gonna have to trim down this backsplash back here to get it to fit under the Z-brick right there. And then I cut this piece here, and this is gonna be fitted right back in this area here. That's gonna be cut down a little bit. I'm gonna also have to narrow it down a little bit here. But for the most part, I've got things placed.
Okay, so I put blue tape around the border where the sink is going to be. Then I put a mark over here in this very far right corner where the backsplash is. That's going to mark the end of the butcher block, countertop, and backsplash. Here is 2 pencil marks I made to make sure that the 2 pieces center up nicely.
Okay, we're making progress. I used the template that came with the sink to make the cuts. One cut over here for the left side of the corner, one cut over here for the roughly 6 foot, or I should say 5.5 foot side of the corner. This template came with the sink. I used it to trace a line or a border around these 2 individual pieces of butcher block, and I got the cavity that you see here. I just taped it back in place just to verify that everything's kosher. And then what I did was I used a piece of cardboard. I just stole it from my my daughter's coloring books, and I cut it in place to match the piece that I will need for this section down here. And I already cut that. I just used my table saw, and I used a 60 tooth saw, 10-inch saw on my table saw to get nice fine cuts. And that's important because this is going to be the visible edge when this is placed, when all is said and done. So as you can see, it fits like glove right there. Alright, and I wanted the grain to go exactly perpendicular to how the sink is going to be placed, so that the grain really plays off nicely with each corner unit, and it's a nice straight grain as you're looking at it. And you can see how this visible edge, it's a nice clean cut. When you're using a table saw to make a cut like this, you want to make sure that the piece goes through the table saw steadily. If you stop for any length of time, you're going to have burn marks. I suppose you could sand those off, but it's just easier to just make a nice, clean, even cut. I'm still going to have to sand this down just a little bit because it's a little bit rough, but it looks good, and I'm happy with that. Back here, I used a scrap piece of plywood that actually came off this diamond-shaped floor down here by serendipity. Really, it matches back here perfectly, and so I just used that to create this piece of butcher block that will go back here. And you can see same situation as the front piece. The grain goes nice straight up and down. Actually, it's exactly perpendicular to the grain for the other pieces, so that'll make a nice pattern. And the way I'm going to fasten those in place will be with these zip bolts. So I'm going to have to drill some cavities on all of these butcher block pieces and use these zip bolts to secure everything. So I'm going to do that next. Alright, here's the cavity for the sink. Prior to placing the sink, I had to cut 2 cavities. Here's one on the left side of the cabinet. Here's one on the right side of the cabinet. These give clearance for the sink. The sink's going to go down about 10 inches, 9, 10 inches or so. And I wasn't 100% sure that I would have room for the sink So I cut these cavities out just to make sure that I've got room for the sink. The actual working portion of the sink, the tub itself, is about 30 inches across, and I've got a little less than 30 inches across this front side of the cavity. So rather than take chances, I figured, hey, I better cut the cavities now before placing the sink, because this sink is one heavy sucker, and I didn't want to fool around with trying to place it, then pull it out, then cut cavities, etc. So anyway, those are the cavities for the sink, and now we're going to place the sink. Okay, sink's in place. I had help with that, by the way. Don't try to put in a cast iron sink by yourself. You need at least an extra pair of hands to help you. But anyway, it's in place, and now I'm just going to hook up the drains and the faucets and all that good stuff, and we'll have a working kitchen once again. This gap over here will be taken care of eventually when I start working on this portion of the kitchen, which obviously that's down the road. Hope you enjoyed this video though. And now I have to block this stuff off so our cat doesn't get in here. Anyway, hope this helped you. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment. Thanks.